A broken record since long before last night. That Mitt Romney is the only candidate that's moderate enough, that's smart enough, that can connect with the largest number of people to actually have a shot at beating President Obama in November. But here's something you're not hearing about. I mean, you may know this, but how much have you really thought about this? Mitt Romney is a multi-millionaire. Not a few million or 10 million. Mitt Romney and his wife are apparently worth more than $250 million. And despite attempts to, fit in with real America, flying Southwest Airlines, hanging out in NASCAR pits and wearing Gap jeans, Mitt Romney is one of the wealthiest men to ever run for president, certainly to have a shot at winning the nominee. Remember this? This is Romney's $12 million oceanfront property in San Diego that he's in the process of expanding, well, actually quadrupling in size. But I'm not begrudging him, just simply reminding you, the American people who live in a country with a near 9% unemployment rate, when I ask you this: is America ready for a multimillionaire to become president? Not that President Obama or former Presidents Bush didn't have money, but Romney is a little bit of a different ballgame. And it's not just personal wealth. Now is also a good time to talk about the role of money in politics overall. And this process, which, let's face it, folks, is just beginning. In an article called Iowa, the Meaningless Sideshow Begins, Rolling Stone's Matt Taibbi writes, this caucus marks the beginning of a long, rigidly controlled, carefully choreographed process that is really designed to do two things: weed out dangerous minority opinions and award power to the candidate who least offends the public while he goes about his primary job of energetically representing establishment interests. And Matt Taibbi joins me now. Hey there, Matt. Let's talk about this. How can Mitt Romney, with all this wealth, even begin or pretend to represent establishment interests?
Well, he does represent establishment interests. How he pretends to represent the interests of ordinary people is another question. I think, what he's going to really run on, I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction out there with the way that government is run. Romney's going to come in and say, I've been sort of a leading proponent of efficiency my entire life. My company, Bain Capital, has helped streamline corporations my entire life, so I'm going to do the same thing to the federal government. I don't know if it's how convincing that is, but that's going to be the way he's going to try to appeal to ordinary people.
It's true, and if Romney does become the nominee, it's ideas like this President Obama may press hard upon, not to mention, as you just said, Romney's time at Bain Capital, which, of course, The Daily Show so humorously touched upon. Let me play this really quick, Matt.
Mm-hmm. It feeds into the pre-existing narrative about Mitt Romney being an out-of-touch multi-millionaire. A narrative based around pictures like this, from when Romney ran the buyout firm Bain Capital. Everything about Romney tells the tale of a man who just fired your dad.
So John Oliver there, of course, painting.
That's dead on.
Yeah, totally. Romney as scary, evil businessman. But I want to put some real figures up, just, to remind people. According to the 2010 census data, 46.2 million people, Americans, live in poverty. That's 15% of the total population. These are the highest poverty numbers since 1983, and currently, as we see there, the median household income is about $49.5 thousand. So again, I think it's important just to show people, this candidate who will probably become the nominee, what they're getting into here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Mitt Romney, in a lot of ways, is you could plausibly argue that he's the architect of the modern American corporation. He, with his consulting firm, they kind of pioneered this idea that companies should not necessarily be in the business of employing a whole lot of people and making products. What they're really designed to do is create profits and drive profits upstairs to upper management and cut out as many extraneous employees as possible. So, this sort of modern movement we have in America where you don't have gigantic companies like GM that employ hundreds of thousands of people, but instead you have small companies that make enormous profits and drive those to a very small group of senior executives. That's Mitt Romney. That he was really the guy who pioneered that idea, and he's behind a lot of the unemployment right now.
I know, Matt, you outlined in your piece how many hundreds of thousands of dollars candidates get from the wealthiest in this country, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, et cetera. And I think a lot of people would be surprised about this. I know that you showed some stats from 2008. And when it comes to Wall Street donations, it's not really about which candidate they agree with most or which party even. It's about the candidate they think will win and therefore have the power to make decisions. I want you to talk about this reality in 2008 and how you think that this has affected what we've seen so far under the Obama White House.
Well, Wall Street historically donates generously to both parties. And it's usually close to a 50-50 split, although if you go back to the early 90s, the Democrats have actually gotten slightly more money from Wall Street than the Republicans have. But what they typically do in an election season is they hedge their bets. They're essentially professional gamblers anyway, and they decide who is more likely to win than the other, and they donate accordingly. I think in the last election cycle in 2008, the consensus on Wall Street was that Obama was more or less a shoo-in to defeat any Republican candidate, which is why they basically called him as a 7-3 favorite, which is why he got $733 million and John McCain got just over $300 million. So they give to both parties, but they hedge their bets. If they think one guy's more likely to win than the other, then they're going to give more money to that guy. But it has nothing to do with ideology. It's entirely about who's likely to be in there and who they're going to influence more.
But what do you see has been the impact of this giving? Obama got so much money from these corporations. Do you think that he's sort of acted in such a way that should make us feel like he's kind of in payback mode over the last 4 years?
Oh, absolutely. I think the most obvious, well, first of all, there was absolute continuity with George Bush's bailout programs. The same guy who was the architect of Bush's bailouts, Tim Geithner, was retained by Obama. But more importantly, there were no sweeping prosecutions. When FDR came in after the Great Depression, one of the first things they did is they went and they instituted strong new reforms and they cleaned up Wall Street. Obama did exactly the opposite of that, and his Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, has said openly that if they had pressed too many fraud prosecutions, that it would have created, quote unquote, a run on the bank. In other words, other investors around the world would have fled the American markets because they would have been frightened off by all the corruption. So I think they intentionally did not press forward with sweeping fraud prosecutions because they were protecting those markets. And so Wall Street got what they paid for. They got a guy who did not put them in jail.
And let's talk about the prospect, the potential of even more people getting what they paid for in what we saw recently with Citizens United, the U.S. Supreme Court case that, in a nutshell, found that corporations can be people and that money can be speech. Talk a little bit about, how this might affect what we see in the next election.
Well, you're never going to completely eliminate corporate money in politics, no matter what they did. If they had somehow reformed campaign contributions in the opposite direction and made it harder for people to give money, they still would have found a way. I mean, that's sort of the mantra of Washington, is whether it's soft money or hard money or political action committees or Democratic National Campaign Committees, the money's going to get there. But the problem is the Citizens United case made it incredibly easy for companies to give virtually unlimited sums of money to the two parties, which means that in the next election cycle, there's going to be basically no way for a small, independently driven candidate to compete against a major party candidate.
Matt, final question for you. Just your predictions. I mean, money in politics is such a subject that seems to be pretty near and dear to your heart. What is the one thing that you think people really should know, that Americans should understand, that you think really isn't quite out there yet regarding this topic?
I think most Americans don't understand that most of the major campaign contributors in this country give to both candidates. I think they still... even the people who supported the Citizens United decision, and there were a lot of people among the Tea Partiers who did that, they did that because they believed that companies were practicing free speech by supporting one or the other candidate or one or the other policy. What they didn't realize is that that's not what goes on. These companies give money to both sides purely because they hope to influence whoever wins. So it's not an ideological. It's not an ideological contest. It's just an attempt to influence the outcome.
All right. Great, wonderful reporting as always. Rolling Stone's Matt Tiabbi joining us from New Jersey. Thanks so much.